The first time I noticed her light was on, it was past midnight. A soft yellow glow bleeding through the blinds, steady and too warm for that hour. I told myself it wasn't my business. People forget things all the time. Still, the thought sat somewhere in the back of my head like a song that doesn't end. By the third night, I was counting, her kitchen light always the same one, always left on. I live alone, second floor, end unit. The kind of apartment where the walls hum with old wiring and the water heater sighs at random hours. I work nights sometimes, freelance design gigs, so I see things others don't. Patterns, shadows, the way the world sounds when most of it is asleep. She moved in 3 months ago. Early 40s, maybe mid. Not married, I think, at least. I never saw anyone else come or go. Her name's Marianne, though I only learned that from the mail that sometimes ends up in my box by mistake. We've said hello a few times, once in the hallway, her arms full of groceries, the strap of her bag slipping off her shoulder. Once at the laundromat across the street, when she smiled at me over the whir of the machines and said, "You're the neighbor who plays piano, right?" I don't play piano. My laptop keyboard probably sounds like one through the wall. But I nodded anyway. Tonight I saw her again at the small coffee place near the corner. I was waiting for my order, scrolling through nothing on my phone. She was at the counter, talking to the barista. Calm, like she'd been there 100 times before. She turned, noticed me, and smiled in that polite, too small way people do when they're trying to place a familiar face. "Apartment 2B, she said after a second. "You live next door, don't you?"
I nodded.
"You're Marianne, right?" "Guilty." She laughed softly, a dry lidded somewhere between shy and tired. "Sorry if my light bothers you. I keep forgetting to turn it off." I hesitated. "It doesn't bother me. Just thought you might be up late or something." Her hand brushed the sleeve of her coat as she searched for change. Small, careful movements, like she was measuring how much space she was allowed to take. "I guess I am," she said. "It's easier to fall asleep when the room isn't completely dark." There wasn't much to say after that. The barista called my name and I picked up my cup. She stayed behind, stirring her tea even though it didn't need stirring. When I turned to leave, she was looking out the window, her reflection floating over the streetlights like she belonged to another hour entirely. Back home, I set the cup down and stared at the wall that separated our apartments. I could almost hear her moving. Faint steps, the clink of glass, maybe the creak of her chair. I opened my phone, typed a message I never sent: "Hey, you left your light on again," then deleted it. Outside, her kitchen window glowed like always, cutting through the quiet hallway. I stood there a while, watching it through the blinds, wondering if she ever noticed my light too, or if I was just another shadow in her late-night landscape. When I finally turned off my lamp, her light stayed on. And for some reason, that made it harder to sleep. The next time we talked, it wasn't in the hallway or the coffee shop, it was in her kitchen. I'd come home from a late grocery run, and the power on my side of the building had gone out. I was standing there, keys in hand, when I saw her light still burning under her door. That same soft yellow glow. I knocked once, maybe twice. She opened it a crack, holding a mug. Steam drifted out like breath. "Hey," I said, "do you have power?" "Mine's out." She blinked, surprised but not unfriendly. "Oh, I didn't even notice. Come in for a minute. I have candles if you need some." Her apartment felt different from mine. Warmer. Lived in. The same old floorboards, but somehow softer. A stack of books near the window, a plant that had seen better days, a small radio whispering an old song. She handed me a candle. Vanilla scent, faint and nostalgic. "I keep these around for blackouts," she said. "Habit from when I lived with my mother." She hated the dark. She sat at the kitchen table, wrapped her hands around her mug. I stood for a second before sitting across from her. "Do you still hate it?" I asked. "The dark." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No. Just what comes with it." She didn't explain and I didn't ask. The radio clicked softly, then went silent. I noticed how she kept brushing her thumb along the edge of the mug. A small, unconscious motion. My hands were resting uselessly on the table, pretending not to want to reach for something they shouldn't. She looked up once and caught me watching. Neither of us said anything. I told her about my work. Design stuff, mostly done from home. She nodded like she understood the loneliness in it without me saying the word. After a while, she said, "You remind me of my son's friend. He used to come by after school, always stayed longer than he needed to. I think he liked being somewhere quiet." Her voice went soft on that last word, quiet, like it meant more than peace. "How old is your son?" I asked, before realizing maybe I shouldn't. 26. Lives up north now. She smiled faintly. "You're about his age, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away. I just nodded. Something about the question made the air feel thinner. "She offered me tea before I left." I said yes. When she handed it to me, her fingers brushed mine, just barely. Enough to make the moment stretch longer than it should have. She looked at me then, not directly but through that small, unreadable smile people wear when they're trying not to reveal something. "Thanks for checking in," she said. "It's nice to know someone's awake too." Later that night, the power came back on. I didn't light the candle. I just left it on the counter, unburned, smelling faintly of vanilla. And I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It started happening without plan, small crossings of time and space. A knock on her door when a parcel got mixed up. A text about the landlord fixing the pipes. Her asking if I could help her lift a box she couldn't quite manage. Nothing special. Nothing that would make sense if I tried to explain it to anyone else. But every time I left her apartment, something stayed behind. A faint trace of her perfume, the sound of her slippers on the floor above me, the way she said my name like she wasn't sure she should. One Thursday, I brought her a new bulb. Her kitchen light had finally burned out. She opened the door with her hair damp, a towel around her shoulders. "Oh, you didn't have to." "I was at the hardware store," I said quickly. "Thought you might need it." Her smile came slow. "You always notice things I forget." She stepped aside to let me in, still drying her hair. I reached up to change the bulb, her presence close behind me. The room smelled faintly of soap and lemon. When the new light flickered on, it was too bright. She squinted and laughed softly. "Too much?" I asked. "No," she said. "It's just been dim for so long, I forgot what clear light looked like." Something about that line hit deeper than it should have. We stood there longer than we needed to. The kind of silence that hums, then a knock at the door, a woman's voice, sharp, cheerful. "Marianne, you in there?" She froze, mouthed "Neighbor." I stepped back quickly. She opened the door just a little, spoke in that polite, lowered tone people use when they're trying to sound casual. "Oh, I was just having the light fixed," she said. The neighbor's eyes flicked toward me, then back to her. Something in that look. Curiosity, maybe warning. When the door finally shut again, Marianne leaned against it and exhaled. "Sorry," she said. "People in this building notice too much." I shrugged, tried to smile. "Guess that makes two of us." She looked at me then, really looked, like she was trying to read a thought I hadn't said out loud. Her hand brushed her towel. "You should go. Before someone else gets ideas." I nodded, but didn't move. Neither did she. For a second I thought she might say something else. Or I might. The air between us felt fragile, something that could break with the wrong breath. She reached up suddenly, tucking a stray piece of hair behind her ear. Her fingers trembled just slightly. I almost reached out to steady her hand, to finish that half-thought neither of us would name. But she stepped back first, and whatever that was that almost folded into the space between us like a sigh. That night, her light stayed off, and I lay awake wondering if she'd finally remembered, or if she was waiting for me to notice the difference. It was raining that night. Not hard. Just steady enough to fill the air with that soft, steady hush that makes everything feel closer. The kind of rain that slows people down. The kind that leaves you thinking too long. I found her outside, sitting on the building's front steps, a dark coat pulled around her, hair damp and sticking to her cheek. She didn't look surprised when she saw me. "Power's out again?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, just needed air." Her voice was quiet, like she didn't trust it not to break. I sat a step below her. The rain tapped the railing, the streetlight buzzing overhead. Neither of us spoke for a long time. "Did your client like the design?" she asked finally, her tone too casual to be real. I laughed softly. "You remember that?" "I remember things I shouldn't," she said. and forget the ones I should. She smiled at her own words, but it looked more like regret. I watched a drop of rain slide down her sleeve. You seem off tonight. She turned to me then, eyes a little glassy. Do I? The words hung there, a thin thread between us. Sometimes, she went on, I think about how people end up next to each other. Like you and me. Just by walls and timing. She looked out toward the street. And how dangerous that can be if you start noticing too much. Her voice trembled, almost imperceptibly. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to make it lighter, a joke, something to break the tension, but nothing came. Instead, I said, maybe noticing isn't always bad. She looked at me then, sharply. You're young, she said, like it was both an explanation and an accusation. Old enough, I said before I could stop myself. She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Don't do that. Do what? Make this sound simpler than it is. Her hand was gripping the railing. The rain was starting to soak through her coat. I wanted to reach for it, to take her hand, warm it. But I didn't. She turned her face slightly toward me. You should be out somewhere else. With people your age. Not here. Maybe I don't want to be anywhere else, I said. The silence that followed felt heavier than the rain. Her eyes softened, not surprise, not disapproval. Just a kind of tired understanding. I shouldn't let you say things like that, she murmured. You didn't what? Let me. For the first time, she didn't look away. Her gaze lingered. Too long, too steady. I thought she might reach for me, or I might. But then a car passed, splashing light across the wet pavement, and she blinked as if waking from something. Go inside, she said quietly. Her voice was soft, but the rain couldn't drown the tremor in it. I stood, hesitated. She didn't move, and before I turned to leave, I asked, or maybe just thought, the question that hung between us all along, what happens if we stop pretending this is nothing? For 3 days, I didn't see her. No light through her window. No sound from the hallway. Just the faint echo of her absence. The kind that makes silence feel like it's waiting for something. I told myself she was busy away fine. But the truth is, every time I passed her door, I slowed down. Listened for the soft creak of her floorboards, the kettle whistle. Anything, nothing. On the 4th day, there was a letter in my mailbox. The kind that isn't meant for me but ended up there anyway. Her name in neat handwriting. No return address. I slipped it under her door without knocking. 10 minutes later, I heard movement. Then the door opened just enough for her voice to reach through. Thank you. That was all. No warmth, no small talk, just distance. The next morning, she wasn't at the coffee shop. The barista asked if I wanted my usual 2 orders. I said, just 1. That's when I realized I'd stopped buying my coffee just for myself. Later week I ran into her outside by the mailboxes. She looked different. Dressed nicer, makeup subtle but deliberate. A woman trying to reassemble her edges. Going somewhere, I asked. She hesitated. Dinner, with an old friend. A pause. My ex-husband. Actually, it hit harder than it should have. Not jealousy, something quieter, heavier. Like I'd been reading a book and someone suddenly took it from my hands. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. That's good. Must be nice to catch up, maybe, she said. Or stupid, depends how the evening goes. I smiled like I was fine. She smiled like she knew I wasn't. Before she left, she adjusted the strap of her purse, her fingers brushing mine by accident, and then she was gone. Walking into the kind of night where I didn't belong. The next few days I didn't knock. Didn't text. Didn't even glance at her window. She'd started turning off her lights. Every night. Like she'd finally remembered. And somehow that made it worse. One evening, I almost messaged her. Did it go okay? Did he hurt you again? Did you think of me? I typed all 3, then erased them. Instead I wrote hope you're doing alright, and stared at it until the screen dimmed and the words disappeared. I didn't feel heartbroken, I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. That night, I walked past her door and caught the faintest hint of vanilla. The candle she once gave me. And for a second, I thought about knocking. Just once. But the light stayed off, and so did mine. It was late again when she knocked, soft, once, twice. The kind of knock that's almost an apology. I opened the door and there she was. No makeup, hair slightly wet from the mist outside, holding a grocery bag that didn't look heavy enough to justify a visit. I bought too much, she said, holding it out. Soup. Do you want some? Her voice was careful, rehearsed maybe, like she'd tried out the line a few times before saying it. I nodded. Sure. She stepped in like it wasn't the first time, but we both knew it had been weeks. The quiet between us was thick, not awkward, just full. While she heated the soup, I leaned against the counter, pretending not to stare. Her movements were slower now, deliberate, as if she was buying herself time. Did dinner with your ex go okay? I asked finally. She didn't look up. It was fine. A small pause. He wanted to see if something could still be there. And, she stirred the pot, metal against metal. There isn't. She turned the stove off and faced me. I thought maybe that would make me feel relieved, she said. But all I felt was tired. She exhaled, sat down at the small table, and gestured for me to join her. We ate quietly. The soup was too hot, but neither of us waited for it to cool. Steam rose between us, thin, ghostly. Do you ever feel like you keep fixing things that were never meant to last? She asked suddenly. I swallowed. Every day. She smiled faintly, eyes lowering to the table. I keep thinking about that night, she said. The rain, what you almost said. Her words hit somewhere low in my chest. I met her eyes. You knew. I'm not stupid, she said softly. Just afraid. Off what? She looked at me, really looked, for the first time since that night, off wanting something that can't survive daylight. I didn't know what to do with that. I wanted to tell her it wasn't about daylight, or rules, or numbers. But the truth was, I didn't know what it was about. Only that I missed her in ways I had no right to. I tried to stop thinking about you, I said quietly. Did it work? I shook my head. Not even once. Her hand tightened around the spoon. You shouldn't say that, but it's true. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Then she reached across the table, slow, hesitant, and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was warm, familiar. This doesn't have to mean anything, she whispered. I almost laughed. It already does. We sat there like that, not moving, not talking, just letting the silence say what we couldn't. When she finally stood to leave, she paused by the door. Thank you for noticing, she said. For what? For the light, she smiled, small, tired, but real, and added, okay. Then she was gone. It's been months since that night with the soup. Winter folded into spring, and the city began to sound different again, softer, looser, the way it does when people start leaving their windows open. We never talked about that night, not directly, but something shifted, quiet, certain. Now, some mornings, she knocks once on my door before work. No words. Just the small sound of her thermos clinking against mine. I fill her cup halfway with my coffee, she adds tea to mine, and we both pretend we don't like it. It's become a thing. Our thing. I don't see her every day anymore. Sometimes a week passes, she's visiting her son, or I'm buried in work. But I still notice when her light's on. Only now, it doesn't make me restless. It just means she's home. She started watering her plants again. I fixed the radio that never quite worked. Her apartment smells less like vanilla candles and more like something alive: citrus, mint, soap. It's strange how easy things become when you stop trying to define them. One Saturday we sat outside the building, same steps as before, the evening light fading into that soft blue that doesn't belong to any particular hour. She handed me a paper cup. Tea, she said. Not coffee. Thought I'd try your side of the world for once. I smiled. You'll hate it. I already do, she said, and sipped anyway. We laughed. Quietly, the way people laugh when they've already been through too much to need volume. At 8:47 a.m. A time I only noticed because the clock on her wall is always a few minutes slow, she said. You know, I never actually forgot to turn off that light. I looked at her. You didn't? She shook her head. No, I just liked knowing someone might notice it. The admission landed softly, like dust settling. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to fix or question. We just sat there, watching the street come alive. Buses starting, doors opening, someone laughing too loudly down the block. Her hand brushed mine, not by accident this time. Sometimes love doesn't need to bloom. Sometimes it just sits quietly between two people, steady, ordinary, earned. I still don't know what we are. Maybe neighbors. Maybe something past that, but when her light is on, and mine is too, the whole building feels a little less lonely. She stood to leave, brushing crumbs off her coat. Don't forget to turn off your light, she said, smiling. I did. Just long enough to see hers stay on.